taken into custody after officers fired pepper spray at the porch. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night, so listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
Is this the tether?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Former USC wide receiver Jordan Addison, a first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings in April, is already in the doghouse with the Minnesota State Patrol. Addison was given a speeding citation over the weekend for driving 140 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone on a Minnesota highway. Addison was pulled over at 3 a.m. He told the state trooper he was rushing to get home because his dog was having an emergency. Addison apologized on Monday but gave no medical update on his dog. Florida A&M's football team was cleared to resume all football activities. Head coach Willie Simmons shut down the HBCU program on Friday after several players were featured in a rap music video that was filmed inside the team's locker room. The administration is still investigating. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
Live from historic Limerick Park in Los Angeles, I'm Tavis, Smiley. I'm just happy to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, check out the Tavis Smiley podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and listen at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today in our second hour.
I want to be around to pick up the pieces when somebody breaks your heart. Somebody twice as smart as I. Somebody who will swear to be true as you used to do with me, who'll leave you to learn that misery love's company. Wait and see. I mean, I wanna be around.
We will commence hour 2 today with part 2 of our tribute to the iconic vocalist Tony Bennett, who passed away last Friday at the age of 96. Yesterday, we reprised one of my favorite conversations with my friend and brother Tony Bennett, a talk we had back in 2011 when he dropped Duets 2. Today, in hour 2, sounds from an amazing public dialogue we had in 2017 on the release of his book, Just Getting Started, our tribute to Tony Bennett at the top of hour 2. On the B side of hour 2, Florida Governor and GOP presidential candidate Ron DeSantis has doubled down on his view that slavery benefited black folk. Did it? I mean, of course, that's a rhetorical question. Saying slavery was good for black folk because it gave us jobs is like saying that the Nazi Holocaust was good because it gave us Anne Frank's diary. It's like saying that apartheid was good because it gave us President Nelson Mandela. It is absurd. It takes Orwell to a new level. Anyway, I digress for the moment at least, but we're going to jump right back into this conversation on the backside of hour 2 with Dr. Daniel Black, and trust me, you do not want to miss his analysis today. In our third hour,
summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the Milo is high. Your dad is rich and your mama's good looking. So won't you hush a little baby, don't you cry.
Grammy-winning blues and roots music artist Taj Mahal joins us live in studio in hour 3 before he sits for a conversation with Taj Mahal tonight at the Grammy Museum here in Los Angeles. It's going to be a great day of music, a tribute to Tony Bennett at the top of hour 2, Taj Mahal live in studio in hour 3. I look forward to today's program, as I hope you do as well. All that said, we'll commence today's show talking politics with editorial director and publisher of The Nation magazine, Katrina vanden Heuvel, one of my favorite guests, who will join us live when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Good thing we've got 3 hours.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Extreme heat can make you very sick and can be deadly. For Californians 65 and over, it's important to have a plan. Ask your healthcare provider if your medications affect your ability to cool down. Know the signs of heat illness and stroke, as well as the location of your nearest cooling center or air-conditioned space. And if you have loved ones over 65, be sure to check in on them on hot days. Learn how to stay safer from extreme heat at heatreadyca.com. Brought to you by the state of California.
You can do it all by yourself, baby girl. What's your name? Let me talk to you. Let me buy you a drink.
Spilled your drink? Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up spills quicker. And each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less than the leading ordinary brand. So you can get back to your night. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Where are we on the lineup?
It's official. Avery is producing Main Street Music Days.
We need to be ready. We're going to have lots of people. What's the status on the new sound engineer?
They need an audio technician to keep things level from sound checks to encores.
Make sure audio from one stage does not compete with another.
Indeed can help them hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. Our hiring platform instantly connects you with quality candidates, and you can schedule and conduct virtual interviews right from the Indeed dashboard. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Contracts, and grants. This is Rambo, and I'm back August 5th. Contracts, and grants. I'll be at the Westin Hotel, LAX, Saturday, August 5th. Me and my guests are fast-paced in the contracts and grants. They only speak 6 minutes each. I have LA County, I have the city. I even have Everett, the CEO of Lindustry, coming to talk to you guys. And for the first time ever, I have Metro's Director of Certification coming. We average over 700 attendees, so you know the rules. Parking's about $15 with the event validation, event, coffee, snacks, all free, paid for by Rambo know-it industry. And yes, you can bring guests. So save your seat, DeonRambo.com. Listen, contract ready's only 2 hours from 10 a.m. to 12. But if you get there around 9:30, I'll probably be doing some Q&As and things like that before the events I never get a chance to do. I honestly keep saying, I don't know what's more important for LA businesses right now than local contracts. So I'm back, Westin Hotel, LAX, Saturday, August 5th. August 5th. It takes 2 minutes to register. DeonRambo.com. Go register now. DeonRambo.com.
In our community, mental health struggles can sometimes go unnoticed. The suicide rate among Black youth has risen faster than any other ethnic group. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receives it. African American women are only half as likely as their Caucasian counterparts to seek professional mental health services. Even those who guide us spiritually can sometimes face their own challenges. 45% of pastors say they've experienced depression or burnout to the extent they need to take a leave of absence from ministry. As people of faith, it's time to acknowledge it's okay not to be okay. You can pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources. Join us in raising mental health awareness in our community. Funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and the Champion Counseling Center of Faithful Central Bible Church.
I'm Dominique DePrima. We can all fall into the trap of mindlessly spending sometimes. I know I do it. But one tip for staying on track is when you have an impromptu purchase that comes up, try making a habit of taking a quick look at your bank account balance before you buy it. It's not just about seeing how much you have in your checking account. Just looking at your account might put the urge to make that impulse purchase into perspective and help you make better choices that'll benefit you for the long term. Whatever your financial goals, U.S. Bank Access Commitment Initiatives can help support you in reaching them. Access your financial goals at usbank.com/access. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's going to be a full show today. Let's get this party started. We commence with Katrina vanden Heuvel, the editorial director and publisher of The Nation magazine. And Katrina, before I get started, let me say first, congratulations. I saw that big award you just took home, the Mark Raskin Award for Civic and Intellectual Courage. That's high cotton, as we say, Katrina vanden Heuvel.
Well, I felt a little bit like an imposter, as I know so many people do at different times. But I was honored. I knew Mark Raskin and his great son, Jamie Raskin. Many of your listeners may know of Jamie, presented the award. And I was honored because our civil rights correspondent, Reverend Barber, William Barber, was the first recipient of the award a few years ago because COVID interrupted the ceremony. It was 3 years later after they awarded it to Reverend Barber. But it was very beautiful. It was at the Library of Congress, and libraries under siege these days, so we were proud to be at the library. And Mark was a co-founder of the Institute for Policy Studies, a think tank in Washington, which is truly radical in the sense of going to the root, not willing to play games inside the Beltway, where a lot of games are played. Yeah. But I want to listen. I was thinking it's TNT. It's Tavis, Tony, and Taj Mahal. That sounds like that sounds good.
I hadn't thought about that.
I'd rather listen to the other segments than.
I hadn't thought about the 3 T's. That is funny. I received that. Let me ask you though, before I jump into this piece you wrote about Oppenheimer, which I'm anxious to get your take on, and some other political issues that we have to cover in this hour. And I'm glad I've got you for the hour. Let me stay with this notion for a moment at least. As I mentioned, you won the Mark Raskin Award for Civic and Intellectual Courage. That's a big deal in our business. And I'm curious, set yourself aside for a moment. I know how modest you are, but what does it mean in this particular moment? In this American moment, what does it mean for you to speak civically and intellectually with courage? What's that mean?
A lot of words there, Tavis. I first take the honor because of The Nation magazine, which is 158 years old, and I've been editor, it seems like, for that amount of time, or editorial director. But The Nation, and I feel I play this role at my best, doesn't accept the limits on democracy. We understand that, we've heard more perfect union, we have a lot of work to do to get to that more perfect union, and to stand up for the rights, which are often diminished in this country. You listen to DeSantis. I mean, Oppenheimer we'll get to, but what it struck me that he was someone who was defamed. He was attacked as a communist, all of these things. And for speaking out about issues of patriotism, of the public role of a scientist in society. But what I think civic courage is being willing to take positions, to stand by first principles. And when they come after you, whether it's in the media or it's a gang or a posse, or, they attack you for your views, you stand tall in the context of the struggles that have made this country. We got a lot of, I think the history of this country is zigs and zags. I think of DeSantis in the last few days, the obscenities, the toxicity. I personally don't think we should pay attention to him, but I guess that's dangerous. But then today, President Biden is, how to put it, he's going to open a memorial to Emmett Till and his mother in Mississippi and in Illinois. And that's taken too many years for justice to just begin to be done to those who, like Emmett Till, were destroyed and ravaged and lynched in this country. And I think of Robert Johnson, the publisher of Jet, who in 1955, I believe it was 55, Tavis, made the decision, and he was a businessman, but he made the decision that Jet would show the photograph of Emmett Till. And one didn't know at the time, but the ripples around the world in this country opened up more than a discussion, but that there was a horror and understanding by good people that this is not what they consider America, but that America exists, and we see it today. We thought it was, we thought we'd done the work, but that work is still to be done.
Yeah. You mentioned Robert Johnson. I know you meant John Johnson. John Johnson was Ebony and Jet, and Robert Johnson was BT. I knew both of them.
Oh, forgive me.
Well, of course, Bob Johnson's still living. No, I know what you meant. I just wanted to say that for those who may have confused the two. Bob Johnson was BT. John Johnson, Ebony and Jet. But let me follow up on that right quick here. And I'm not naive in asking this, and I love the answer that you gave me. What it means to you, at least in this moment where our democracy is so fragile, to be courageous when we speak civically and intellectually. I appreciate the response. Let me ask you though, again, not out of any naivete, why it is that you think that kind of civic courage is so uncommon these days? Why are we, given how fragile our democracy is, why are we so afraid to speak truth to power, and for that matter, to the powerless?
Boy, that's a big question, but it's important. I think some of it is that civic values have been eroded, like that there's, I'm all for Barbie. I love the Barbie movie, but there's a consumerism, a social mediaization, a quickness to attack, intolerance that doesn't allow people to listen to each other and have debate and discussion. But I think there are a lot of things in our society which have people feel afraid to speak out sometimes, and I think that is wrong. I think I'm not talking about obscenities. I'm talking about just how we continue as a community and a society. But civic values are not prized in ways that it seems to me should be. The other area where I feel very strongly about, and it's really off the radar, Tavis, we would do really well to redefine what security means. The militarization of our country and its engagement with the world. Security to me is about fighting pandemics, fighting nuclear proliferation, fighting inequality, global inequality, and climate. We sit here in this summer. How can one deny in this extreme weather that there's not a man-made issue we have to confront? And that to me, and food insecurity, these are all issues that get lost. And what's a nuclear weapon going to do for that? So I talk a lot about alternatives. If I had to be an ism, it would be an alternativism. I'm an alternativist because there have been roads in this country's history which are good that were taken and very bad that were taken. And, we live in the shadow of nuclear weapons. And but I do think sometimes, and I worry about the Democratic Party in kind of a big way, that you can't just fight American fascism. You have to give people something on offer, that you have to be more than just against. Fighting American fascism is a worthy and important task, but for a lot of people, they seek, more immediate things in their life.
Yep. I love the frame that you're putting us in. My friend Connie Rice, who I talked to yesterday, always says that in conversations these days we have to always get our frame right. If you don't get the frame right, then nothing else matters. I want to get the frame right here. And I love the way you sort of reframe the way we ought to be thinking, the way we ought to be defining and addressing this issue of security. What would it take for us to shift from the way we see it now in this militaristic frame to the frame that you're offering us that we need to consider?
It was on offer. It was more on offer in a curious way in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had people like the leader of Sweden, and that country's now part of NATO. What is NATO? NATO is not a coffee clutch.
Mm-hmm.
It's a military institution, and it was designed. I used to say
not a
Tavis
coffee
Tea
clutch.
Party, but I can't say Tea Party anymore.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
You got me? But it used to be. It was designed to counter another military institution, the Warsaw Pact. Not to get too weird, but that folded at the end of the Soviet Union. But NATO is all about providing weapons, and it's good for the weapons manufacturers, the companies. But, the leader of Sweden, which is now part of NATO, and the reasons for that. But leader of Sweden was a man who thought of security in the ways I'm talking about. And there was, human security is really, I think, an important frame that is off the radar right now. I think it'll come back, but it's going to take rethinking and work. Yeah. And I think that's it's a new frame.
Yeah, when you said human security, it is a new frame for us to consider. It's not a new frame for Dr. King. And
Absolutely.
King once spoke, as you know, and it's been written about more times than I can count in the Nation magazine by brilliant writers. But King suggested in the 60s that what America needed then, and God knows we need it now, is what he called a revolution of values. What we need is a revolution of values. I don't quite see that happening, but I think that's the answer, Katrina. A revolution of values.
It's a beautiful phrase.
Yeah.
I will add that, 1967, he spoke at Riverside Church, and he added to the revolution of values and other brilliant frameworks that he was opposed to the Vietnam War. And that turned his allies against him.
Of course.
You know that, Tavis.
Yeah.
I mean, not just President Johnson, but, the liberal allies. He was never invited back to the White House. And interestingly, as a journalist, as an editor, the Nation called him a moral prophet. In fact, he wrote for the Nation for 6 or 7 years. But the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the big so-called liberal, TV and other denounced him as a traitor. And that, to me, is civic courage, where you speak. He knew. And, I think there's a new biography, the depression he fell into at different times after being ousted and outed and not treated well by his allies.
Yep. No, it's a powerful book. I wrote a book, of course, about the last year of his life called Death of a King. But Jonathan Ives' new book called King is the one you're referencing. And it's an amazing text by Jonathan Ives. Just bumped into Jonathan in Chicago last weekend. So
is that right?
Yeah, it's an amazing text by Jonathan. I highly recommend it. And to your point, and let me just take a moment to just say thank you to the Nation magazine for standing by King during that tumultuous period.
Because
everybody turned.
That was part of, turned against.
Everybody turned against him. Yeah, the Nation magazine. The Nation magazine, and we mentioned earlier John H. Johnson of Ebony and Jet fame. The Nation and Ebony and Jet may have been the only three that stood with him. Everybody turned against him when he came out against that war in Vietnam. Yeah.
And someone I knew growing up was, the FBI had these surveillance on King. And it was prompted by, again, the ugly rivulet sort of stream through our history of this McCarthyism, this feeling that he was in touch with communists.
Yeah.
But the taping of King, it was a vendetta by Hoover.
Yeah.
There is a biography of Hoover, if anyone wants to read it, by a former Nation intern, which is pretty great. It won the Pulitzer Prize this year.
No, I read it. And I had her on the program.
Yeah.
You had her on the program, yeah.
Oh, she's great.
No, she is amazing.
I have not read the book. It's huge. I look at it and it looks at me.
Well, the King book ain't small. The King book ain't small either. It took me a few weeks to get through it, but it's a good book. Yeah. Speaking of McCarthy, we'll get to him in this side. Not the McCarthy you're talking about, but this guy ain't far from him. The Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, says publicly that the Biden family allegations, and I quote, are rising to the level of impeachment. The Biden family allegations are rising to the level of impeachment. That from Kevin McCarthy. We'll get to that later in this hour. Let me do this right quick. I want to just move this swiftly. I mentioned that you wrote a piece about Oppenheimer that I was fascinated by. And for those who are movie fans, you know they called this past weekend Barbenheimer. They called it Barbenheimer weekend because there were two big films that came out. There was the Barbie film referenced earlier by Katrina vanden Heuvel. There's the Oppenheimer film, and together they had huge box office numbers, the best they've seen in years, and so they called the weekend Barbenheimer. Katrina wrote a powerful piece about Oppenheimer, and I've got about 5 minutes here before we step aside and continue on the other side. But just take a minute for those who didn't see your Oppenheimer piece to unpack what you were trying to get across in that editorial.
So 2 or 3 things. Robert Oppenheimer, famous American scientist, best known as the father of the atomic bomb. But the film raises, this is set during the war, World War II. The film raises questions of the role of scientists in the public square, the political square, as public intellectuals, as people who speak out. And Oppenheimer, after creating the bomb with other scientists at Los Alamos, turned to the idea that the bomb should be controlled by an international forum. But most important, again, Tavis, is that he spoke about issues of patriotism, of the role of science in society. And think of today, it's so timely, not just because of the arms race and the dangers of nuclear weapons, but think of the role of science and how someone like a McCarthy, we were talking about, or DeSantis, or the Republican Party has become know-nothing party in treating science like a danger, not an ally. And so Oppenheimer, in that sense, I think, is a warning, but also an inspiration for those. We don't have many science. Oppenheimer was on the cover of Time magazine in 1947, I believe, as a scientist. Can you remember? I mean, we've had Fauci, but that's a different experience because that was in the heat. But the role of science has been demeaned, and Oppenheimer's very much worth seeing for many reasons, and not just because the co-author of the book upon which it's based was an editor for The Nation for about 20 years. And I hope he has points.
Do you think, I got about 90 seconds here, do you think that what we are experiencing in real time, starting namely with the extreme heat, do you think that the science deniers are starting to get the message? I say all the time that people eventually wake up, if not because they see the light, then because they feel the heat. Well, we're really, literally feeling the heat right about now. Is that enough to convince these science deniers that something is wrong with our planet?
Marginally.
Marginally.
Tavis.
Wow.
I think there's an emotion.
Yeah.
I think there's an emotional piece to it that doesn't get addressed by rationality and science. And I saw that in some reporting about the money coming from the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden legislation, going to red states where people don't want to use that money for like solar panels because they don't believe it. So it's a slog. It's a process. I do think there's some people who've decided, geez, this heat, extreme weather, but it's going to be a long process.
Yep. I love Katrina's honesty, even when I don't like her answers. So her answer was marginally. You think of the states where a lot of the money's going to red states. Yeah.
But there is an emotional kind of investment that it takes a longer time to kind of overtake.
Yeah. When we come forward, let's talk some politics. I mentioned Kevin McCarthy. She mentioned McCarthyism. This is a different kind of McCarthyism, but nonetheless McCarthyism in real time. Our Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, says that the Biden family allegations are rising to the level of impeachment inquiry. We'll talk about that with Katrina. We will talk about Biden today creating a monument to Emmett Till. amidst all these fights over black history. You heard Katrina reference that. We'll unpack that a bit more for you when we come forward. You heard her reference Ron DeSantis. It's not just Ron DeSantis saying that slavery was good for black folk. We'll talk about that in more detail in hour 2 today on the backside after I give it to Tony Bennett with Dr. Daniel Black. We'll get Katrina's take on that in this hour. And Ron DeSantis has now said that January 6th was not an insurrection. He said that to Russell Brand. So Ron DeSantis just is going to the bottom fast. But he keeps making news, and he's running for president, so we got to talk about it. Katrina vanden Heuvel is our guest right now on Tavis Smiley.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Welcome on in to a Tuesday morning, July 25th. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The body of the personal chef to former President Barack Obama has been recovered from a pond near the family's home on Martha's Vineyard. Tafari Campbell apparently fell into the Edgerton Great Pond Sunday night while paddleboarding. Campbell's body was found Monday close to the shore by search crews. Lottery players are hoping that luck is going to be on their side as they attempt to win the 5th largest jackpot in Mega Millions history. The game's top prize has grown to at least $820 million ahead of tonight's drawing. The last time someone hit the jackpot was all the way back in April. The cost to play the game is $2 per ticket, and the drawing will be streamed live online. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Trouble's working through South LA. It's going to be a broken down vehicle in Linwood. It looks like Valley Village, North Hollywood. The 170 southbound is get to Burbank Boulevard. Have a crash here onto the right side. The 105 west at Crenshaw, that's a stalled vehicle onto the right shoulder. Stalled vehicle clearing on the 105 west around Vermont. That's made it to the right. Linwood, somebody broke it down on the 105 east, approaching that 710. They're stuck in the center divider. And Baldwin Park, your 10 west at Francisquito La Puente, had a stalled vehicle from earlier. That's finally out of our way.
Wendy's is open until midnight or later, which means all your favorite menu items are up later too. The Baconator still tastes just as juicy and bacony at night. So listen to that craving and turn in for the night at a Wendy's drive-thru. Hours may vary at participating U.S. Wendy's.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Former USC wide receiver Jordan Addison, a first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings in April, is already in the doghouse with the Minnesota State Patrol. Addison was given a speeding citation over the weekend for driving 140 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour zone on a Minnesota highway. Addison was pulled over at 3 a.m. He told the state trooper he was rushing to get home because his dog was having an emergency. Addison apologized on Monday but gave no medical update on his dog. Florida A&M's football team was cleared to resume all football activities. Head coach Willie Simmons shut down the HBCU program on Friday after several players were featured in a rap music video that was filmed inside the team's locker room. The administration is still investigating. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. Is someone you love struggling with addiction and mental illness? Is improving your family's health important? Want to leave a legacy that your family can grow? Are you ready to enhance your perception of life experiences? Then wake up weekends at 7 a.m. with Urban Family Focus and get the wisdom, opportunity, resources, and motivation to live your best life. Join the conversation on Urban Family Focus Saturday and Sunday at 7 a.m.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate meets a scholarly match.
I'm Tavis, Smiley. Glad to have you in with us in this hour. Our guest in this hour is Katrina vanden Heuvel, the editorial director and publisher of The Nation magazine and the recent recipient of the Mark Raskin Award for Civic and Intellectual Courage. Always delighted to have Katrina on this program. Katrina, I'm feeling sort of Jeopardy-ish. There are 3 topics on the board, Katrina vanden Heuvel. I'll let you choose which topic you want to do first. Do you want do you want Kevin McCarthy? Do you want Joe Biden and Emmett Till? Or do you want Ron DeSantis? Which topic do you want first, Katrina vanden Heuvel?
You choose, Tavis. I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
On an more upbeat note, I'm involved with a group called Covering Climate Now.
Mm-hmm.
Hope people will go check that out. And we have about 2 billion journalists across the world covering climate change. But the most interesting part to me is that there's been a program to work with weathercasters around the country, and particularly in the South. And I find that they're really eager to get more information, more resources. And I think local news is critical in many communities. I watch it every night, and if it can lead with something other than blood and gore, it's good. So the weathercasters, to me, are the front lines.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll take your entreaty.
Right, so
I'll choose for you. I'll choose for you. Since we're talking about deniers, let's start with Ron DeSantis. So let me just tee this up. You already know this, and the audience in part knows as well. But of late, there have been a couple of things he said that just are completely outrageous, and I'll let you sound off on why he's still in the race and what we make of the fact that he's continuing to just, lead this race to the bottom. So days ago, he said that slavery was good for black folk. He has doubled down now on that. As you heard me say at the top of the program, saying that slavery is good for black folk because it gave us jobs is like saying that the Holocaust was good because we got Anne Frank's diary out of it, right? Or that apartheid was good because we got President Nelson Mandela. It's absurd. But he's doubled down on this notion that slavery was good for black folks. We'll get into that in more detail in our second hour. And now he tells Russell Brand that January 6th was not an insurrection. Here's the thing. We were told that Ron DeSantis, you recall this line, everybody used it, that Ron DeSantis is scary and dangerous, but he's smarter at least than Donald Trump. That was the line. He's an Ivy League educated lawyer, that he's smarter than Donald Trump, and yet every time he opens his mouth, he sounds as stupid or stupider than Donald Trump. What am I to make of that?
So Tavis, it's a really important question. You talked about the frame before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what you're looking at in the Republican Party is Trump and his Trumpian excesses and extremism still defining a lot of the Republican Party. Who is supporting this? You got to ask, where is this coming from? This is part of American history that we thought had been excised rightly, had gone. And here you have the second leading candidate in the Republican primaries after Trump talking this way. And I think some of it goes back to critical race theory demonization. Mm-hmm. It goes back to a demonization and an othering and making that a brand and a hallmark. It's just obscene. It's obscene, it's toxic, but it's plain to some extent. I mean, that it's actually being discussed seriously in some ways. is a measure of how far we have to go. DeSantis is scary because he, as you said, he's like the smart one, right? He's not the Trump one. But I do think the race to the bottom, the race to the extremist bottom, is part of what the Republican Party is dealing with at this point. And there's a base that is taking it in, it seems. I mean, you got to ask why, and then just it's hard to believe.
Yeah. Let me look a little further down the road. So Ron DeSantis continues to say these things in hopes of, to your point, this race to the extremist bottom. He's saying this now to play to some base in the GOP, which he hopes will allow him to get the nomination. The polls don't indicate that. Donald Trump at the moment is still the presumptive nominee. But I see what DeSantis is trying to do. Here's the problem looking further down the road. This is not a winning strategy for a general election. So how do you? No. You can't roll this back though, Katrina. Come the general election, you can't roll it back.
You know what? I hate to tell you, you might be able to do a little bit of this country. One of our contributors once said the U.S. of amnesia. I fear that there's a willingness to suspend, history and memory in favor of winning in, the Republican Party. And I think the base strategy is beyond dominant right now. And I think the pivot is possible.
Wow.
And that's what's so frightening.
Yeah.
And I do. But now, Trump is out there, all Looney Tunes. But again, the base, I always think, we should be looking at Trumpism, right? And DeSantis is part of Trumpism and what's happened to this, Republican Party, and why? I mean, the racism. This, Tavis. There's a desire to hold on to what was, and what was includes horribly slavery, and the people are like freaked out. All this attack on trans people, on gay people, on African Americans. It's like people showing their worst and their fears in ways that, like, they don't want the country to change.
Yeah, so
it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Now, how to fight it? I do think media bears a responsibility, and we're seeing there's a new alternative media structure. You know that, Tavis.
Yeah.
Some of it's interesting, some of it's not so pretty, and there's an openness to kind of quote a range of views. And I'm not kidding. There's possible DeSantis pivots to a general.
Yeah, I'm thinking some of this stuff he can't walk back. Katrina vanden Heuvel, much smarter than I, says the pivot is possible. But we shall see.
But the media has to play a role in reminding people.
Yeah.
Because it could just pass. I mean, it's hard to believe this could pass.
Yeah.
But don't deny.
Yep. You said that we have to fight this. Indeed, we do. We had Kimberly Williams Crenshaw on yesterday, speaking of critical race theory. She has a TRC summer school that we talked about yesterday for people who want to learn more about that. And President Biden doing his part, at least in this regard today. As you mentioned earlier, today he's creating a monument, establishing a national monument today to Emmett Till amid these fights over Black history. So in some ways, although there's a certain symbolism to it, the president is at least pushing back in this regard, Katrina.
And Tavis, monuments matter. We've seen the fights over monuments. It is important that there be a monument to Emmett Till because, kids, high schools will visit. As part of that visit, there'll be a lesson. Excited that Kimberly Crenshaw, this is a different point, is coming on the Nation cruise in middle August. Will benefit from her wisdom.
Oh, good.
But someone like Kimberly, but look at what happened at Texas A&M. I don't know if your listeners followed this, but the president resigned because she brought in a very distinguished, experienced editor from the New York Times whose work had focused on diversity, inclusion, equity.
A black woman.
Yeah. And the alumni and some of the trustees raised a ruckus. And then she just stepped back because they, like with Nicole Hannah-Jones at North Carolina, they began to eat away at her contract.
That's
so
right.
It wasn't tenure, it was 4 years. Then it was a year.
That's right.
And in dignity, she stepped away. But this is what's going on in some of these places, and that has to be, I think, first of all, exposure is important so that it doesn't go under the roof or doesn't go under the road.
I hear you. The Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley National Monument will span 3 protected sites in Illinois, where Emmett was born 82 years ago, and in Mississippi, where he was killed at the age of 41 after, of course, being accused of whistling at a white woman. So the president unveiling and creating that monument today in honor of Emmett Till. It took a long time, as Katrina said earlier, to get a monument to Emmett Till, but I'm glad that he and his mother are finally being so honored by President Joe Biden. When we come forward, we'll get to Kevin McCarthy and some other things with Katrina vanden Heuvel. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580.
The family of Keenan Anderson is suing the city of Los Angeles for $100 million. Maisha Cairo here with your K-Black Minute News, brought to you by CaliforniaBlackMedia.org. Keenan Anderson, a high school English teacher that was visiting Los Angeles from Washington, D.C., was tragically killed at the hands of the Los Angeles Police Department in January of this year. His family, alongside civil rights and personal injury attorney Benjamin Crump and Carl Douglas, have announced a $100 million lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles. Crump and Douglas are representing Keenan Anderson's son, Sincere Anderson, and his mother, Gabrielle Hansel. The family is suing for civil rights violations, assault and battery, false imprisonment, and negligence on the part of the LAPD officers. The family of Keenan Anderson and attorneys Crump and Douglas want it to be known that this is only part of a systemic issue within the fabric of police departments everywhere.
The Los Angeles Urban League helps African American and others in underserved communities achieve true social parity, economic self-reliance, and civil rights. For over 100 years, Los Angeles Urban League has ensured our communities have access to careers with living wages, opportunities to start and grow businesses, and clear pathways to personal and professional growth. Programs like BizCamp, Construction Career Academy, Bob Business Ready, and B-Warp. The Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Program are examples of the ongoing events designed to make our centennial mission to rebuild Black Wall Street right here in LA a reality. To sign up for our newsletter or to support the Los Angeles Urban League with your time, talents, and donations, visit laul.org. That's laul.org. The Los Angeles Urban League is a proud sponsor of Urban Family Focus, Saturdays at 7 a.m. on KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here in LA. Once you've started your business, Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's pre-application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
So Kevin McCarthy, Katrina vanden Heuvel says to Fox News' Sean Hannity that the Biden family allegations are rising to the level of impeachment inquiry. That's the strongest statement he's made so far. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what to make of it. But what do you make of it?
You know, Kevin McCarthy doesn't know who he is, and he's like a hostage, but held. You know, his deal with the MAGA power elite was a kind of bargain. And Kevin McCarthy, to put it generously, is like a moral nullity. But he's back and forth and back and forth. I think I'm kind of sick, and I think a lot of people are of the sort of prosecution as politics. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to go far. But the Republicans have minted that politics pretty well. And he's probably, looking for things to do, and he's Trumpized and kind of it can't operate freely. He has to do what Trump says, and I think that's part of his problem.
But to your point, though, he's all over the map on this. I mean, he said months ago, in fact, pushed back push back against those GOP lawmakers who wanted to vote on a resolution to impeach President Biden. That's what he said a few months ago, and now he sort of changed his tune.
Listen, moral constancy is not Kevin McCarthy's greatest quality. He's being, pushed around, I think, by this election, and I think he's trying to get his bearings. But, the push for impeachment of Biden is a long-held kind of mantra in the Republican media, in the party. And I think it's hard to look at the Republican Party as it's constituted now without looking at the extension of media. Fox is no longer, I think, the big thing. And you got Rumble and you got all these other modalities and a lot of playing to those. And so that ups up the extremism.
Yeah. I asked this question to one of our guests yesterday, but it wasn't Katrina vanden Heuvel, so let me ask you right quick now. Beyond Kevin McCarthy, and I take your point, he's being held hostage by these Republicans on the Hill. You can't start out the way he did with, 28 votes, whatever it was, to get elected.
Remember those nights?
Yeah. Vote after vote after vote. So you knew he was going to end up being held hostage by somebody, given all that he had to sacrifice and agree to do to get the job. So this is, in some ways, this is no surprise. But I guess what is surprising to some people, though, is how anti-law enforcement the GOP has become, attacking the FBI and other institutions. What's your read of that?
Ooh, I'm a heretic on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that, there's a long tradition. We were talking about King and the FBI's role. I'm not someone who considers the FBI or the CIA arbiters of morality. And I think our media, to some extent, has put them in that place. I think you got to be skeptical, whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration. I'm not a huge fan of those agencies.
Yeah. I knew she was going to say that, and that's precisely why I asked that question. I knew her answer. For those who listened yesterday and heard today, you say, Tavis asked that question yesterday. I did. That's why I prefaced it by saying I didn't ask it of Katrina vanden Heuvel. I knew her answer would be different, and there you have it. Our remaining moments with Katrina when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
Attorney Joe Cordell.
Business owners and professionals face special challenges in divorce court. In addition to everything else going on, they have to contend with allegations that they are earning more than they are, coupled with claims on their business or practice itself. Clients with assets depend on their divorce lawyer's skills in these matters, and that's why it's so important to hire someone that has those skills.
1455 Frazee Road, Suite 1050, San Diego, California, 92108. CordellCordell.com.
Do you have heart failure and often hear,
"Those stomach issues ruined your birthday"?
"You're too tired to play catch, Grandpa."
"Sweetie, you haven't touched your tools since the carpal tunnel syndrome diagnosis."
If these seemingly unrelated symptoms sound familiar, talk to your cardiologist and ask about transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy, or ATTR-CM, a rare and underdiagnosed disease that gets worse over time. Learn more at connecttoyourheart.com. That's connecttoyourheart.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
So, Katrina, in the 4 minutes I have left, let me take your temperature on the following. I saw a piece you wrote not long ago about Robert Kennedy Jr. and his campaign for the Democratic nomination, of course, against a sitting president named Joe Biden. Marianne Williamson was just in the studio the other day, and a few days prior to that, my friend and brother Cornel West was in this studio. So we've talked to Marianne, we've talked to Cornel. Robert Kennedy Jr. is on his way here, and perhaps we'll get to President Biden on at some point as we move forward. But my question is, what do you make? And they're all three different people, of course: Marianne, Cornel, Robert Kennedy. But what do you make of the fact that that the president is getting a push? Or push back, as it were, from his left?
I wish it was a stronger pushback, to be honest. I admire Cornel West. We had an editorial wishing he was running in the Democratic Party. Marianne Williamson is very interesting. Bobby Kennedy Jr., I think his foreign policy, as I wrote about, is really something that we haven't heard from a presidential candidate in decades. I think his dismissal of science, I would call it that, is problematic, and his distrust of institutions. I just spoke of my distrust for the FBI, but he's distrustful of, major institutions. I think he's more than Cornel and Marianne Williamson. I think he's really pushing back more, effectively in the numbers. What that means is interesting. He's been doing a lot of media, as they have. But I'm someone the nation endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. We believe in insurgent campaigns and challenging the Democratic establishment from the left. I don't think this year has the same markings as 16 and 20 in terms of the kind of insurgent spirit, which should exist. But I think it's muted. I think it's kind of folded into some of the labor movement activity. We may see a UPS strike.
Sure.
We may see a UAW strike. You're out there with the writers and the actors. They're teachers, they're nurses. That's an insurgency, which I think the Biden White House is a little flummoxed by, because Biden's been good on labor compared to previous presidents. But the UAW head, fairly radical, hasn't endorsed Biden yet. And, their White House is not sure what's going on there. So anyway, I am for insurgent spirits. I think each of the three candidates you mentioned has issues. And I fear it's not the strongest insurgency framework for this time.
I hear your point. My exit question here with 90 seconds to go. For those who didn't see the piece or want to understand better why did the Nation Editorial Board suggest that Cornel West should be challenging from inside the Democratic Party and not outside?
So this was not the editorial board; it was just the editor and the publisher.
Okay, fair enough.
The feeling that having witnessing Ralph Nader once, twice, and the view that third parties nationally don't usually make a real run at it. I hate to use the word, the S word, there's a tendency to sometimes spoil. Listen, the nation supported Working Families Party. It supported many local, state, regional runs. But the presidency is a tough one because of the systems. We need to reform the Electoral College. We need to reform this and that, and then have a strong third-party run. But at the moment, the third-party runs are often difficult because of the system and ballot access. It's boring. That's what's, by the way, politics can be trench warfare, excuse that, or boring. But I just wanted to say one thing about, King. Remember Dick Cheney? And we didn't talk about the pathetic nature of Pence.
Sure.
But, Cheney used to oppose making King a national holiday.
That's right.
He called him, and think of the evolution where we are now, Emmett Till Monument today, president. But, you still have retrograde.
Yep.
And it's in that spirit, which is so ugly.
The struggle continues, and we say around here all the time, when we fight, we win, but we got to fight because the struggle does continue. For now, I thank Katrina vanden Heuvel, editorial director and publisher of The Nation magazine. We'll do it again. All the best to you, Katrina. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. A lot more to come on Tavis Smiley in this next hour. Tribute to Tony Bennett, a conversation about Ron DeSantis and his suggestions that slavery was good for us black folk. And Taj Mahal joins us live in the studio in hour 3. It's going to be a great show. Already has been a great hour. 2 more to go.